I'm Tara Velker, she, her, and we're here today for Accessibility Wins, How Champs Are Pushing Studios Forward. But before we get started, we wanted to let you know we are presenting to you from traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the First Peoples of our land, including the Coast Salish peoples, Musqueam, Squamish, Snoqualmie, and Tsleil-Waututh. And with that, I'd love to kick off this panel. Now, what is an accessibility champ? You may not know. It's just someone who is working in their studio, pushing accessibility forward, working with people with disabilities, and making sure that they can get their game as accessible as possible. But of course, every studio is a little bit different, which is why we've got this panel together of three wonderful people from three different studios. We're going to be talking today with Vicky from Undead Labs, Carrie from Turn 10, and Katie from the Coalition. And so with that, let's go ahead and welcome our panelists. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Tara. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I'm so excited that all of you are able to be here today. Let's do a round of introductions. Carrie, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Hi, everybody. My name is Carrie Gaynor. I'm a UX design lead, primarily working on the motorsport product line. I've been a accessibility champion for 2 to 3 years, and I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome. Katie, let's give an introduction.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Katie Scott, she, her. I'm a senior designer at the Coalition. Our last two titles were Gears 5 and Gears Tactics. And my role as a designer is to design experiences that enable people to have fun. And I've been an accessibility champion with the Coalition for a year.
Awesome. And Vicky, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Vicky Eberts, she, her. I'm the head of player experience at Undead Labs, working on the State of Decay franchise. And I've been an accessibility champ for about 2 years now.
Awesome. So, of course, we're here to talk about accessibility and being champs and how everyone has a little bit of a different experience and how all of the studios approach accessibility a little bit differently. Vicky, let's go ahead and start with you. How does your studio approach accessibility?
That's a good question. I think for us, we're a little bit of a smaller studio, and it's still a little organic for us. I think we've got a good handful of folks at the studio who are passionate about accessibility and who evangelize for it. And they're kind of sprinkled across different teams. And so it feels like we've got a good number of people who beat the accessibility drum for the work that they're doing on their teams. And so far, that's working pretty well for us.
That's really awesome. I know that a lot of accessibility champs programs start, very grassroots like that. Katie, I know that you guys have a little bit of a different experience going at the Coalition. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, before I came to the Coalition, there was a lot of interest and a lot of energy put into accessibility. The previous champ, Otto Ottesen, did an amazing job, and our Gaming for Everyone champ, Zoe Curnow, as well as our creative director, Matt Searcy, have put a lot of energy into making Gears 5 in particular a very accessible product, which is actually an award-winning title in terms of accessibility. And when I was offered the role of champ, I wanted to jump in right away, but I also felt like to build on this foundation that we had made, we needed a little bit more structure and process in place if we wanted to keep pushing in this space. So we started a strike team within the Coalition. It's called the Accessibility Strike Team. It's about 17 people across all of our disciplines that really help drive this initiative forward. And since these people really dig deep in accessibility and take it back to their teams, we're really influencing at the grassroots level and at every level of production. We also leaned into a lot of process and procedure. We have a mission statement. We document how and when we work with people. We have multiple decision trees that help us decide what accessibility features we might use and in what places. So we're getting to be a very process-heavy driven studio in terms of accessibility, which is really allowing us to have that scalability and consistency across our multiple titles.
And that's definitely a challenge when you have multiple titles, making sure that you're keeping that consistency across every product that you're working on.
Yes.
Now, Carrie, I know that Turn 10 definitely has a unique relationship with accessibility. So the head of Turn 10, Alan Hartman, is the exec sponsor for the Gaming and Disability Community Group as part of Gaming for Everyone. So what does accessibility look like over at Turn 10, and how do you guys run things?
So at Turn 10 Studios, I would say that the process began a little bit ambiguously, where it was sort of like accessibility is out there, and you guys can basically figure out ways to innovate in that space. So what we started doing was having inclusive design sprints, and we invited a lot of members and leads from various teams to the sprints. And basically what that entailed was speaking to subject matter experts that live with various disabilities in their day-to-day, and really like learning what their challenges are, what they're passionate about, and how they game. And what we were finding out from that was that it was actually very difficult for a lot of them to participate in the racing genre of games. So I think that that really lit a fire in a lot of people to, get involved with the accessibility space. But like I said, like things weren't exactly formalized and the space was very ambiguous back then. So at that point, organically, I feel like that's the word of the day. Organically, this group of very passionate interdisciplinary volunteers came together and decided to found what we're calling the Accessibility Leadership Team, and approach accessibility on their individual teams and then also holistically on this interdisciplinary team. So we're trying to come up with formalized processes and really develop ways on injecting accessibility into the DNA of the studio, just like you would think of any other, feature set like monetization or telemetry, but really getting accessibility into our process as early as we possibly can, and have designers thinking about that as early as possible.
That's definitely a big lesson for everyone, and that the earlier you do accessibility, the earlier accessibility is going to be. If you try to retrofit it, there can be so many problems, especially if you kind of engineered yourself into a weird corner. But, one of the things that you talked about was having leadership, and that, you have, exec buy-in from Alan already. But Vicky, you've talked about, this organic kind of grassroots thing that's kind of organically happening. Again, word of the day. So when you're working in that space, how do you work on getting leadership buy-in or doing that up managing to show that accessibility is really important?
Yeah, I think getting leadership buy-in is really similar to getting buy-in from your peers. For me, it's all about building empathy. We were also able to do an inclusive design sprint, like Carrie was mentioning, where we bring in advisors and they talk about their experiences playing games, their frustrations with the way things are not maybe designed in a way that takes their needs into consideration. And hearing from those humans about their experiences and their troubles with games really it's so powerful. There's nothing more powerful than hearing from the individual who's being impacted. And having leadership sit in on those conversations and sit in on our ideation sessions after we talk to those people was I think really eye-opening for them. And I think it was also inspiring for them to see the team get so engaged and get so excited about all of the possibilities that, all the opportunities to make our games better for everyone.
I think that once you get people the opportunity to see what the problem is and empathize with the people who are hitting these barriers, it's definitely much easier to get buy-in. Actually, I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. So, for me, my job title is Accessibility Program Manager. It's my full-time job. But for you guys, none of you guys put accessibility in your job title. So you are people doing accessibility in your day-to-day work as champs, but it's not your full-time job. And let's go ahead and kick this off with Katie. How are you working to balance both doing this accessibility champs work and also literally being a lead designer on a major franchise?
Yeah, since the Accessibility Champion program is a formal program at Microsoft and the studios must have one, it's been really easy for me to simply say to my leadership, this is what I need to fulfill this role. And at the same time, as a designer, my job is to design experiences that players can have fun with. And accessibility is really just that anyway. It's designing experiences that people can enjoy based on the abilities that they have. So it's very blendable into game design. And that's also meant that I'm able to influence the other designers in that same way. It's really leading by that example. I blend accessibility into all of my designs, and I expect the same from them. And then we ensure that we have processes that support them in writing those features. So we've gotten to a place where each designer's each designer is responsible for the accessibility features in the experiences that they design. And since design is creating about fun experiences, it's actually become very natural. It's a very easy thing to encompass in the design space.
That is great that it's just able to become part of your work and just kind of part of your thought process. Vicky, do you have similar experiences when you're trying to balance? Does it come naturally to you over at Undead Labs?
I think that it does. I think my background is in user experience design. So I'm always thinking about that type of thing. Like, how can I make this experience that we're designing better for all of the players that we're trying to reach? And I think, like I mentioned earlier, a little bit of empathy building really helps people start thinking about these things in a different way than maybe they had, 3 years ago, where maybe they were thinking like, oh, accessibility is this compliance checklist that I have to hit at the end of development. Something that we're doing right now on the next game that we're working on is incorporating accessibility pillars into our design pillars. So this is stuff that we're having people think about and talk about and work into their designs from the very beginning of development. And I think it's gonna make better, more rich experiences for all of our players, not just the people that might need an accessibility consideration to be made for them.
I again love that we're hitting on the earlier you can do it, the better. Now, Carrie, I'm wondering about how this works for you, because I know on the accessibility leadership team that you mentioned, not only do you have kind of your accessibility work, but you guys also throw mixers and educational presentations for the rest of the team. So how do you balance, doing your accessibility champ work with your day job?
Yeah, that's right. We actually do throw a lot of events. We're in, I think, the beginning stages of just teaching the studio how to fish when it comes to accessibility. So we tend to focus a lot more on the education and evangelization portion of things and really getting that accessibility message out to various teams. So I think right now, everybody that is on the accessibility leadership team focuses 25 to 30% of their work time probably on accessibility needs. And sometimes people are actually so passionate about accessibility that, like even if that 25 to 30% doesn't fit like comfortably into their day, they really want to work on it. So, they'll maybe stay a little bit later to, kind of work on accessibility just because they're so passionate or have side projects that involve accessibility. So yeah, we actually try to provide as many opportunities as we can to have people get involved. That includes mixers, which is a combination of just interesting talks from different stakeholders in the studio. And then also we bring in sometimes people from outside studios to speak about their accessibility initiatives. And then we also do a variety of sort of like customer meetups where people can talk to people with disabilities. We threw a mini inclusive design sprint, which was a pared down version of the 2-day inclusive design sprint that Microsoft throws. But we worked with Melissa Boone to figure out what the right, sort of like length of time and cadence for our studio was. So really, we're trying to really front load that education and passion portion so that like down the road, hopefully the work is a little bit less, and the more people we have involved, hopefully the easier it is to really infuse our game with accessible features.
And I love getting more people ramped up, having more people learn about accessibility, and not just having one person kind of be the person for accessibility. And you talked a lot about recruiting allies to the cause. Vicky, you mentioned that, again, you've tried to use empathy to get people involved, but how do you go about attracting allies to the cause?
That's a really good question. For us, it hasn't really been hard. Like I mentioned earlier, we've got a handful of people who are passionate about accessibility, but there are a couple of things that help. Like the inclusive design sprint was obviously really powerful for the folks who are already invested, but also for people who maybe didn't really know what they didn't know. I think it was an eye-opening experience for them. I think being able to bring resources back from accessibility champ meetings or meetups and share it with the rest of the team has been really great. I've been able to share some really nice resources that, developing accessible color palettes. I shared that with our UI designer last week, and it was like mind blowing. It was really cool. Another thing that's worked pretty well for us is a little like friendly competition with the other studios. When we heard the work that Gears was doing, we all were like, well, why can't we do that too? So there's, it's good competition. It's good that all of the studios are kind of working to raise the bar for each other. And I think the more that we can connect the individuals who are building the features with those emotions around accessibility features and building things that are more accessible, I think it kind of spreads like wildfire once it starts.
I think that's definitely true. And I love the idea of all of the studios fighting to become the most accessible. I mean, really everyone wins when that happens. Carrie, you did talk about some of the events that you guys were having, in order to educate and attract more people to accessibility. But what do you think is really important when trying to get allies to the cause?
I think Vicky touched upon it a little bit. I think the empathy portion is a really big one. Like having people in the studio actually feel something emotionally when they see that players can't interact with the title as intended, or feel left out of the design process or the the process of game creation altogether. I think that becomes a pretty big pain point for the design team to go and solve. And then there's some people that maybe don't connect with customers in the empathy sort of way, and maybe need something more numerical to sort of help drive that innovation. So we also look into things like creating report cards or reports, like how accessible is this feature? Can a player get through this list of tasks if they have little to no vision? And sometimes that actually helps light a fire in people as well.
That's really great. But one of the things that I'm kind of seeing from all of you guys is this emotional investment in accessibility can be really important, which means that you definitely have these highs of when you manage to do something awesome and get an accessibility feature out, but maybe you also experience those same kind of lows, and maybe take a morale hit if you don't have something happen that you were really, really fighting for. So Katie, what are some of your thoughts on how to make sure that you keep your morale up as an accessibility champ?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely get, the mean comments and the bad reviews. And I have to remember at those times that every time we fall short of perfect, we're excluding someone. And that actually hits me right in my heart when I say it out loud. And so I try to remember that when you're excluded, you're really hurt. It feels terrible to be excluded from something. And especially in gaming, everyone wants to go on an adventure, everyone wants to be a hero, and everyone wants to save the world. And so when we fall short of perfect, we actually are preventing people from these amazing adventures. But we really try to focus on the wins, not just in our game, but in other games too. We were award-winning accessibility when in Gears 5, and a lot of people called us, the best in class accessibility. But then Last of Us 2 came along and really blew us out of the water. And we were not disappointed by that. We were actually really excited by that. It was very heartening to see that there's this game that's so accessible that we can point people to and everyone can play it. And we really felt like that was, an amazing innovation. But I also focus on just being kind to myself and kind to my coworkers. And we have to remember that the work that we do is not who we are, and that we are doing more than we've ever done before. And that is something to celebrate.
I mean, it's not an accessibility panel if someone doesn't bring up and recognize that all of the work that Naughty Dog put into the Last of Us 2. I mean, we mentioned friendly competition between studios, and I think all of us want to start that fight to figure out, who can knock them out of that top slot for accessibility. I'm hoping it's one of us. But if it's not, if it's someone from Ubisoft who's also doing a great job in the accessibility space, or EA who now has their own accessibility team, you know what? We'll take that with pride, and we'll know that we need to double down and work harder, and maybe that'll keep pushing us forward. But Carrie, I know that you also have some tips and tricks that you follow for trying to keep your morale up during those hard times. So why don't you share a little bit of info there?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Katie touched upon was that sort of like an accessibility win for a studio is sort of an accessibility win for the industry on the whole. So really, when studios have a big win, reaching out to those studios and saying like, hey, what can we learn from you? Or is there anything from your model that we can sort of emulate and bring back to our studio? That really helps, I think, with morale. And then I think also self-care as well, spending time with your friends and family and loved ones. And then I think also, Tara, you and I have talked at length about what is called a feel-good file, which is essentially a digital repository of, comments or interactions you've had with players, where you've been able to actually help them, things that went positively or well in your studio's accessibility journey, that can be uplifting on an otherwise down day.
Yeah, it's really easy to focus on the negatives or get lost. But the fact of the matter is, if you have that one positive comment, you got to help at least one person. And the impact it may have had for that one person could be huge, and it could really be making the difference. So I'm a huge advocate of the Feel Good File. I recommend that everyone literally just keep a log of the things that you've done that have helped people, that have impacted people, even if it's just a simple comment saying, hey, thanks, I can now beat this level. It can really make you feel good because, I mean, we want people to be able to play our games. And so when you hear the comment, I can play your game now, it really does make a difference. So we've kind of talked a lot about, how you guys are being champs, how to keep your morale up. But I think one of the things that we haven't really touched upon is, what do you feel you need to be able to do to be a good champ? Like, what is making you guys successful? So Katie, I actually want to toss it over to you because I know you have some great thoughts on what does it take to be a successful accessibility champion?
Yeah, I think that all of us would probably agree that the word care is the big one here. When I started this, I didn't know squat about accessibility. Like, all I had is this interest in enabling people to have fun. You have to be willing to learn and lean into that growth mindset because you're going to get it wrong. You're going to say it wrong. You're going to be wrong all the time. But what I really do is like lean into the disability community because they actually have the answers like right at their fingertips so they can share it with you. You don't need to be an expert in everything or anything, frankly, because your role is not to invent the answer, but it's actually just to uncover the answer. Accessibility consultants can take a huge weight off your shoulders. And just in the same way that they may not be designers, you may not have their disability. So you both are equally needed in this process and very much complement each other in solving mismatches between players and games.
I think that really reinforces this motto that exists within the disability space, which is nothing about us without us.
Right.
As much as we love to problem solve as game devs, that's what game devs do. There have been some really well-meaning devs who have built a solution that they thought was perfect, only to get it in the hands of players with disabilities and then be like, whoa, this is not at all what I need. So when you embrace nothing about us without us, you understand and you're actually solving the problem in a way that's what they need, that's how they need it to be solved. Because like you said, Katie, we may not understand their experience because it's not our experience. We navigate the world differently in so many different ways. So of course, we probably have thousands of people who've watched this panel and they now want to join the Accessibility Champs movement because this is an amazing panel, of course. And I'm really going to be looking for advice on how to, really get started, get joined. Vicky, if someone is starting their accessibility journey today, what would you suggest they start doing, to really get started?
I think, echoing a little bit of what, Katie mentioned earlier, I think caring a little bit and being curious are the main things. I think you don't have to have the answer to every question. It's almost better if you don't. If you go do a little research and reach out to people and ask questions of people who might know a little bit more than you. We have access to all kinds of experts who, like, this is their job. This is their full-time job to care about these things. And so using those resources, reaching out, not being afraid to ask a question that might feel dumb. It's okay. I think just being a little courageous and curious are the main things.
I think it's really important to call out it is okay to ask questions. I know a lot of people get nervous or they're worried they're going to say the wrong thing. And as long as you're open and listening to feedback, if you do make a mistake, you're going to be okay. Definitely when you're interacting with people who you normally wouldn't or have a different cultural experience or a different lived experience, it can be a little nerve-wracking. But you know what? Your heart is in the right place. And as long as you keep it there, you're going to be totally fine. I guess that would be my advice to, champs who are trying to become their own champ in their studio. And actually, I think that's a great way to wrap this panel up today. I'm going to do a roundtable just asking each of you, what is your advice to someone who wants to become an accessibility champ in their own studio? Carrie, why don't we start with you?
So I think that that realizing that accessibility is a marathon. And as your studio progresses beyond just compliance and doing compliance, and kind of gets more into, spaces where you're making big plays in innovation, your studio may find itself in waters that are more open and ambiguous. So, maybe you didn't, get that funding, or maybe certain features got cut. But just realizing that, even the little accessibility features are big wins and will help somebody. I think that, just being really gritty about things and having a positive attitude as you sort of move forward in this previously sort of uncharted space can be very helpful.
I think that's absolutely great advice. And honestly, that's just kind of great advice for game dev, right? Like we all at some point have had to cut a feature that maybe was like our feature because it was what needed to happen. So definitely have that grit to focus, keep the wins in mind, and move forward. Katie, what's your advice?
Yeah, mine would be, I think, just know that designing for, disabilities or mismatches between people and interfaces is going to drive innovation. It's going to result in big breakthroughs that actually everyone can enjoy. For example, the typewriter was invented as a disability aid. Someone wanted their blind friend to be able to write them letters. Or the underlying touchscreen technology that's in all of our phones was initially developed by a man who was experiencing carpal tunnel syndrome, and he wanted to find a way to input onto his device without pressing so hard. So I think that we really need to stop thinking of disabilities as problems, but instead as innovation inspiration. And I also believe that there's sort of a fine line between disability and discomfort. For example, in my career, I found the overwhelming majority of players play games with subtitles on. So this is as much as 85%, frankly. So this is a feature that's designed for people with a disability, but that is clearly being used by people who do not experience that disability. And again, that's because there's that fine line between disability and discomfort. So this is where, like, if you're a game developer and you got into this because you wanted to do amazing things and help people have fun and really pioneer, I would come into accessibility because it's where you get to do all of that. It's like that goal on hyperdrive.
I think that that's totally true. And there's so many things that we use in our day-to-day life, like you called out, that people don't realize were originally developed for accessibility reasons. The toothbrush I use, it's a power toothbrush. Like that was originally also developed for someone with mobility challenges. And how many of us today use, an electric toothbrush? Almost everyone, right? Like I do. I actually love that you called out the number of people using subtitles in games. You said that there are studies coming from Ubisoft that said, over 80% of people were playing their games with subtitles. So they've actually, in a few of their games, just defaulted to having subtitles turned on because more players were using them than not. So why just not make that default feature? So, Vicky, why don't you round us out today with what is your advice for people looking to become accessibility champions?
I think it's simple to me. I think you just have to care a little bit. And I think if you care a little bit, it's going to light that spark inside of you, and it's going to lead to you being curious, asking more questions, trying to discover what you don't know. I think, asking somebody with a disability to play a build of your game and get their feedback is going to be humbling and eye-opening, and it's going to really make you care. And I think if you care, you're going to spread that onto your coworkers and your peers, and it's only going to create better experiences for all of your players.
I think that one of the themes that has definitely happened today is this idea that empathy is important, but also that empathy is infectious. And because as game devs, we want everyone to be able to play our game. And when you find out there's a group of people that can't, you want to solve that, right? Because you're not building your game for just one group of people. You want as many people as possible to have fun with it. So I want to thank you guys so much for all of your advice, your words of wisdom, and sharing the accessibility journeys that each of your studios have been going on today. It's been incredibly insightful, and I'm hoping that you watching at home have also learned something. And maybe you're actually ready to get started on your own accessibility journey if you haven't already. If you're looking for a place to start, I actually highly recommend catching another session that we have coming up, the refreshed Xbox Accessibility Guidelines. I will be there along with Caitlin Jones as we tell you all about the new Xbox Accessibility Guidelines, how to use them, and how they can help you make your game even more accessible. So again, thank you so much for coming, and I hope you continue to have a great GameStack Live.